The night was quiet, too quiet for the city. The hum of traffic outside had faded, and even the neighbors, usually noisy with music or arguments, seemed to have gone silent. Daniel lay in his bed, staring at the cracked ceiling above him. His small apartment was dark except for the faint orange glow of a streetlight leaking through the curtains. He was half asleep, drifting between dreams and the weight of another lonely day, when a sound broke the silence. It was faint at first, a creak, a soft slide. His eyes snapped open. For a moment, he thought it was just the old pipes. His apartment was always groaning, always making sounds that kept him guessing. But then he heard it again, a sharp, deliberate noise. The unmistakable squeak of the window sliding open. Daniel sat up, heart racing. His hand reached for the old wooden baseball bat leaning against the wall beside the bed. He had bought it years ago at a garage sale. Not for sports, but for nights exactly like this. Nights when the city didn't feel safe. The curtain fluttered as cold air slipped in, and then he saw movement. A shadow climbing through the open window, his breath caught in his throat. Someone was in his apartment. Daniel gripped the bat tighter, ready to shout, ready to fight. But when the figure stumbled into the room, he froze. It wasn't what he expected. She was small, thin, her movements clumsy like she had run a long distance and her body was failing her. She didn't look like a thief or a criminal. She looked lost. Her hair was long and tangled, shining faintly as if it had captured the glow of the stars themselves. Her eyes lifted for a moment and Daniel felt his chest tighten. They weren't normal eyes. They glowed faint and blue like tiny lanterns hidden behind glass. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The girl's breathing was heavy, her chest rising and falling like she had been running for hours. She stepped forward, and in the dim light, Daniel saw her skin shimmer strangely. Not sweat, not dirt. Something else, something otherworldly, as though her body wasn't sure if it wanted to look human at all. Daniel swallowed hard, his mind racing. Who was she? Why was she here? But before he could speak, she reached for the straps of her clothes. With shaky hands, she loosened them. Fabric dropped softly onto the floor. One piece, then another, until she stood in nothing but her bare skin, glowing faintly under the streetlight. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He opened his mouth to demand answers, to tell her to stop, but she spoke first. Her voice was trembling, fragile, almost breaking. Yet it carried something more. Fear, desperation, and a strange kind of trust. "Make room," she whispered. "Please, they'll find me if I stay alone." The words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't a demand, it wasn't even a command. It was a plea. The kind of plea someone makes when there's nowhere else to go, when every door has been closed, and when hiding beside a stranger is the only chance left. Daniel lowered the bat slowly. His breathing was uneven, his thoughts clashing like storm clouds. He should have told her to leave. He should have called someone. The police, an ambulance, anyone. But he didn't, because when he looked at her, trembling and broken in the dark, he saw something he couldn't ignore. She was terrified, alone, and begging him for safety. Without a word, Daniel shifted on the bed, pulling the thin blanket aside. His heart hammered in his chest, but his decision was already made. That night, he made room. The girl curled up at the very edge of the mattress, pulling the blanket tightly around her as though it were the last shield she had. Her body shook, little tremors running through her frame, but slowly her breathing steadied. Within minutes, exhaustion overtook her, and she slipped into a restless sleep. Daniel sat there awake, staring at the strange figure now lying in his bed. His mind spun with questions he couldn't answer. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she so afraid? But none of that mattered. Not tonight. Tonight, the only thing he knew was that he wasn't alone anymore. And though he didn't understand why, deep inside he felt it. The moment she climbed through his window, everything in his life had changed. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay on his side, staring at the shadowed figure curled up under his blanket. Every time he closed his eyes, questions swirled in his head like restless birds. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why had she chosen his window, of all places, to climb through? And yet the biggest question of all was one he couldn't shake. Why had he let her stay? The girl didn't move much in her sleep. Only small twitches, little whimpers as if she was fighting nightmares. Once her hand reached out, trembling, and Daniel almost touched it before stopping himself. He felt like he was watching someone, far too fragile, someone who could break if handled carelessly. When the first light of dawn spilled into the room, Daniel sat up with a sigh. His back ached from the stiffness of staying half awake all night. The girl stirred at the sound, her eyes blinking open. For a second, he braced himself, ready for her to panic, ready for her to run or scream. But she didn't. Her glowing blue eyes softened as they met his, and though her face was tired, there was a faint look of relief, as if waking up here, in a stranger's room, was somehow safer than anywhere else she had been. "Good morning," Daniel said awkwardly, his voice low. The girl didn't reply. She only nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Daniel cleared his throat. I don't know who you are or what's going on, but you can stay a little while, just until you're ready to leave." Her lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she sat up slowly, her bare shoulders catching the light in a way that made her seem unreal. Daniel turned his eyes away quickly, feeling heat rush to his face. He handed her the old shirt he used for painting and motioned for her to wear it. She slipped it on, the fabric hanging loosely over her small frame. It was almost comical, but something about the sight also tugged at his chest. She looked less like a stranger now, and more like someone who belonged. The silence stretched between them until Daniel finally asked, "What's your name?" Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Lyra?" Daniel nodded slowly, rolling the name on his tongue. "Lyra. I'm Daniel." For a moment, something like a smile touched her lips. It wasn't full, not even close, but it was enough to make him feel like he had done the right thing. The day passed strangely. Lyra didn't leave his apartment, and Daniel didn't force her to. He brought her food, simple toast and eggs, and watched her eat as if it was the first real meal she had seen in days. She ate slowly, carefully, as though savoring every bite, and Daniel felt an ache in his chest. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, life had not been kind to her. Sometimes she would look out the window, her glowing eyes scanning the street below with sharp attention. Every little sound made her stiffen, and Daniel could see the fear living just under her skin. He wanted to ask her about it, but he held back. He didn't want to scare her off. Instead, he tried small things. Showing her how the coffee machine worked, letting her flip through his old books, playing quiet music in the background. At first, she barely reacted, her expression unreadable. But slowly he caught glimpses, her hand lingering on the pages of a storybook, her head tilting as she listened to a soft melody. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, Daniel found her sitting by the window, wrapped in the oversized shirt, staring at the sky. The fading light caught in her hair, making it shimmer faintly, like strands of silver. He walked over and stood beside her. "You look like you belong up there," he said quietly, pointing to the sky. Her eyes flicked to him, then back to the horizon. For the first time, she spoke more than a single word. Not anymore. The sadness in her voice cut through him. It wasn't just the tone. It was the weight behind it. A weight of loss, of exile, of someone who had been torn away from home. Daniel wanted to reach out to say something comforting, but he didn't. Instead, he simply said, "Well, you belong here now, at least for a while." Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes studying his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. It was a small gesture, but it was enough. That night, when they returned to the bedroom, she lay down once more on the edge of his bed. Daniel stayed on his side, giving her space. But as the night wore on, he felt the faintest shift. She had moved closer. Not much, just an inch, maybe 2, but enough for him to know that the walls between them were starting to crumble. Daniel closed his eyes, his heart strangely at peace. He still didn't understand who she was or what she was running from. But one thing was certain. The girl who had climbed through his window wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was becoming a part of his life. And deep down, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt unreal for Daniel. His small apartment, once quiet and dull, now held a strange presence. Every morning when he woke up, he found Lyra sitting by the window, watching the sky as if she was searching for something, or maybe someone. She rarely spoke, but her silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with unspoken stories that Daniel could almost hear but didn't yet understand. He tried not to push her. Still, he couldn't stop his curiosity from burning inside. Who was she? Why had she come here? And why did her eyes sometimes glow brighter, like a hidden light flickering behind her skin? One evening, Daniel decided to ask. For a long moment, she said nothing. Daniel thought she might ignore him like she sometimes did when questions felt too close. But then she spoke, her voice quiet, trembling like a fragile thread. "I didn't choose you," she whispered. "I was running, hiding. You were the first safe place I saw." Daniel frowned slightly, setting his cup down. "Running from what?" Lyra's eyes darkened. She wrapped her arms around her knees, pulling them close to her chest. For a while, he thought she wouldn't tell him. But then, almost as if she couldn't hold it in any longer, the words began to spill. "I'm not from here," she said softly. "Not from this world." Daniel blinked. At first, he thought he misheard, but when she raised her glowing eyes to meet his, he realized she was serious, deadly serious. Her hands trembled as she continued. "I came from beyond your sky. My people, they're different. Stronger, faster. We build, we fight, we conquer. But I am not like them. I never wanted their war." Daniel sat frozen, struggling to understand. "You mean you're an alien?" The word felt ridiculous coming out of his mouth, but Lyra didn't laugh. She only nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered, "and they are hunting me." The room suddenly felt colder. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, his heart pounding. He wanted to deny it, to laugh and call it nonsense, but deep down he already knew it was true. The way her skin shimmered, the glow in her veins, the fear in her every movement. It all made sense now. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why would they hunt you?" Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes glistened as if she was holding back tears. "Because I carry something," she said. "Something they want. Something inside me." She touched her chest lightly, right above her heart. "I don't know if you have a word for it, but to them, it is power. To me, it is a curse." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. She wasn't just scared. She was broken, burdened by something she never asked for. "What happens if they find you?" he asked, though he was almost afraid of the answer. Lyra's eyes dropped to the floor. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They will take me back, and when they do, I will never be free again." The silence stretched long between them. Daniel's mind raced, trying to piece everything together. He was just a regular man, living an ordinary life. And now, sitting in his living room, was a girl from the stars, carrying some kind of power that made her both valuable and hunted. He should have been terrified. Maybe he was. But more than fear, what Daniel felt was something else: responsibility. She had chosen his window. She had chosen his bed. She had trusted him enough to stay. Finally, Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "You don't have to run alone anymore." Lyra's head lifted, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For the first time since she had arrived, her expression softened and her lips curved into the faintest, most fragile smile. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" Daniel shrugged, though his chest felt heavy. Because you asked me to make room. And I did. That means something, doesn't it? Her eyes shimmered brighter, and this time, a single tear slipped down her cheek. That night, as she curled up on the couch instead of the bed, Daniel stayed awake again, listening to the sound of her quiet breathing. His life had changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. But one thing was clear. Lyra's secret wasn't just hers anymore. It was his too, and whatever storm was coming for her, it was now coming for him as well. The weeks passed slowly, though for Daniel, they felt more alive than any time in his life before. His apartment was no longer silent and empty. There was always a trace of Lyra, her soft footsteps across the wooden floor, her quiet humming when she thought he wasn't listening, the faint glow of her eyes in the dark. He found himself looking forward to the little things, sharing meals, pointing out stars to her from the rooftop, showing her how to use simple human things like a toaster or a remote control. Sometimes when she smiled, he forgot she was different at all. But beneath those gentle moments, a shadow always lingered. Lyra's gaze often drifted to the window, her shoulders stiff at the sound of sirens or footsteps in the hallway. She never said it, but Daniel knew. Her hunters were still out there. And they were getting closer. It happened on a cold night. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that swallowed the moon whole. Daniel had just finished washing the dishes when Lyra touched his arm lightly. "They are near," she whispered. Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" Her glowing eyes narrowed, focused on something beyond the walls. "I can feel them. Their energy. It's close." Before Daniel could respond, a sound echoed from the alley outside. Not the usual chatter of neighbors, not the shuffle of stray cats. This was different, sharp, deliberate, too quiet to be human. Daniel's stomach tightened. He grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door. His hands shook, but his grip was firm. He had no weapon but this, yet he refused to let fear paralyze him. Lyra stood by the window, her breath uneven, her body tense like a cornered animal. "They found me," she said softly. Daniel pushed her behind him instinctively, even though he knew she was probably stronger than he could ever be. But it didn't matter. This was his home. He wouldn't let anyone take her. The first shadow appeared in the alley, then another, then a third. Tall, sleek figures, their bodies moving with unnatural grace. As they stepped closer to the faint streetlight, Daniel's heart skipped. They looked like Lyra, but darker. Their veins glowed faint red instead of blue, pulsing like molten fire beneath their skin. Their faces were sharper, crueler, their eyes burning with hunger. One of them stepped forward, its voice smooth yet terrifying. "Human, step aside. She belongs to us." Daniel's throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "She doesn't belong to you. She stays here." The figures chuckled, a sound like knives scraping glass. "You are weak. You think you can stand between us and what is ours?" Daniel's grip on the bat tightened. He felt Lyra's hand clutch his arm, trembling. Her whisper brushed his ear. "They will kill you if you fight." Daniel swallowed hard. He knew she was right. He was only a man with a wooden bat, standing against creatures that weren't even human. But when he looked at her eyes, full of fear, yet also trust, he couldn't step aside. "No," Daniel said firmly, his voice steady despite his fear. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The first hunter lunged. Daniel swung with all his strength. The bat cracked against its side, forcing it back a step. Pain shot through his arms from the impact, but he didn't stop. He swung again, wild and desperate, every strike fueled by something deeper than strength, by stubborn human will. The hunters hissed in unison, their glowing veins pulsing brighter. They moved faster now, circling him like predators. Daniel's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. He knew he couldn't hold them forever. One claw sliced across his arm, leaving a burning wound. He cried out but didn't fall. He swung the bat again, catching another across the jaw. For a second, he thought he might stand a chance, but then the bat snapped in half. The wooden pieces clattered to the floor. Daniel's chest tightened. His weapon was gone, and the hunters were closing in. Behind him, Lyra's glow brightened. She had stayed silent all this time, trembling, afraid of what would happen if she revealed herself. But now, as she saw Daniel standing broken and bleeding, refusing to abandon her, something inside her shifted. Her body pulsed with light, brighter and brighter until even the hunters hesitated. Daniel turned, eyes wide, as Lyra stepped forward. Her voice, trembling but strong, filled the room. No more running. The hunters faltered, their cruel smiles fading. For the first time, Daniel saw fear in their eyes, and he realized the truth. Lyra wasn't just someone they wanted. She was something far greater. That night, the fight wasn't over, but the balance had shifted. Daniel had stood with nothing but human courage. And now Lyra was ready to stand too. The hunters had come for prey. Instead, they had found resistance, and the war for freedom had only just begun. The room felt heavy, the air thick with tension. Daniel's arm bled from the claw marks, and the broken bat lay useless at his feet. The hunters closed in, their glowing red veins burning brighter, their sharp teeth bared in cruel smiles. But between them and Daniel now stood Lyra. Her body shimmered with light, her skin glowing brighter with every breath. The air around her seemed to hum, vibrating with a strange energy Daniel could almost feel against his skin. She was terrified. He could see it in her trembling hands, the way her knees shook. But she stood tall, her eyes fixed on the hunters. One of the hunters hissed, "You cannot resist us. You were made to serve." Lyra's voice cracked, but it carried strength. "I was not made to serve, I was made to choose." The hunter snarled and lunged at her, but before Daniel could react, light exploded from Lyra's body. It wasn't just a glow, it was a force. The creature was hurled backward, crashing against the wall with a sharp crack. Dust rained from the ceiling as the apartment shook. Daniel's jaw dropped. He had known she was different, but he had never imagined this. The other two hunters hesitated, their cruel smiles fading. But hesitation wasn't retreat. They rushed forward faster than Daniel's eyes could follow. Lyra raised her hands and a wave of light burst outward, slamming into them. One hit the floor, writhing as if the brightness burned its skin. The other staggered but recovered quickly, its eyes burning with rage. Daniel felt helpless, caught between fear and awe. He wanted to fight beside her, but what was he compared to them? He had no weapon, no strength, just blood dripping down his arm and the stubborn refusal to run. Still, he stepped forward. "You're not alone," he said, voice strained but loud enough for her to hear. "Not anymore." Lyra's head turned slightly, her glowing eyes meeting his for a heartbeat. And in that brief moment, Daniel saw something change in her. The fear in her face didn't vanish, but it was joined by determination. The fight grew, fiercer. The hunters came at them with inhuman speed, claws slashing, voices shrieking. Daniel ducked as one claw tore into the wall just inches from his head. He grabbed the broken piece of the bat, gripping it like a dagger. When one of the hunters lunged at him, Daniel thrust upward with every ounce of strength he had. The jagged wood pierced its side. The creature howled, stumbling back in shock. Daniel's heart pounded. He was bleeding, trembling, barely standing, but he had heard it. He had proved that even a human could fight. Meanwhile, Lyra's power flared brighter with every attack. Light poured from her palms, cutting through the hunters. Dark skin. Each strike left them shrieking, their bodies convulsing as though her very touch poisoned them. But power came at a cost. Daniel could see the exhaustion pulling at her face, the way her body wavered after every blast of energy. She was fighting not just them, but herself. Fighting to stay in control of the very power they wanted to claim. "Lyra!" Daniel shouted, as one hunter cornered her against the wall. She raised her hand, but her strength faltered. The creature's claw slashed toward her. Without thinking, Daniel threw himself forward, shoving her out of the way. Pain ripped through his side as the claws tore into him instead. He cried out, collapsing to the floor, his blood staining the wood. "Daniel!" Lyra's scream was filled with panic and fury. Something inside her snapped. Her glow erupted into a blinding storm, filling the apartment with pure light. The hunters staggered, shielding their eyes, their bodies trembling as cracks of brightness spread across their dark skin like broken glass. Lyra stepped forward, her voice fierce and unshaken. "You will not take me." The hunters screamed as the light consumed them. Their bodies shattered into fragments of glowing dust, scattering into the air like burning ash. And then, silence. The room was destroyed. Walls cracked, furniture broken, air heavy with smoke. Daniel lay on the floor, clutching his side, his breath ragged. Lyra rushed to him, falling to her knees. Her glow dimmed, leaving her looking more human again. Her hands pressed desperately against his wound. "Why?" she whispered, tears running down her face. "Why would you do that for me?" Daniel's lips curled into a weak smile, even as pain burned through him. "Because you asked me to make room, and I did, not just in my bed, but in my life." Lyra's tears fell onto his shirt, glowing faintly as they touched his skin. She bent her head close, her voice breaking. "I won't let you die, not for me." And as Daniel's vision blurred, he felt warmth spreading through him, not pain, not weakness, but something else. Something healing. In that moment, as her glow surrounded him once more, Daniel realized that the fight was not only hers anymore, it was theirs. Daniel opened his eyes to the faint sound of rain tapping against the broken window. The apartment smelled of smoke and dust, but it was quiet now. Too quiet. For a moment he thought he had died. His body felt weightless, warm, almost free of pain. But then he saw her. Lyra sat beside him on the floor, her glowing hands pressed gently over his wound. Her face was pale, her eyes dimmer than before, but her tears shone like tiny stars on her cheeks. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. Daniel tried to sit up, but a sharp pain pulled him back down. He groaned softly, clutching his side. "Guess I'm not dead yet." Lyra gave a weak smile, but her eyes carried too much sadness. "You almost were. You gave yourself for me. Why, Daniel? Why would you throw your life away?" He stared at her, his breathing shallow but his voice steady. "Because you're worth saving, because nobody should face monsters alone." Her lips trembled, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she leaned closer, her forehead almost touching his. "You don't understand. They won't stop. More will come. They'll hunt me until I'm gone, and if you stay with me, they'll kill you too." Daniel chuckled weakly, even through the pain. "Then let them come. I'm not going anywhere." The rain outside grew heavier, pattering against the broken glass. Lyra pulled back, her glowing eyes searching his face. She looked torn, as if two halves of her soul were pulling in different directions. "My people are not like yours," she said slowly. "We were made for war, for conquest, for obedience. I carry inside me the one thing they fear, and the one thing they crave. If I unleash it, I can destroy them. But if I unleash it, Daniel, I will never be the same again." Her hands shook as she spoke, her voice thick with dread. "I don't want to be a weapon, I just want to live." Daniel's heart ached at her words. He reached out, his trembling fingers brushing against her wrist. "Then live, Lyra. Don't let them decide who you are. Don't let them turn you into something you don't want to be." Her eyes glistened with tears again. "If I run, they'll keep chasing. If I fight, I might become the very thing I fear. Tell me, Daniel, what should I choose?" He closed his eyes, searching for strength. He was no soldier, no hero, just a man in a broken apartment holding onto a girl from the stars. And yet, his answer came easily. "You choose freedom. Not war, not fear. Freedom." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the rain and the faint hum of Lyra's glowing veins. She looked down at Daniel, her face softening, the weight of his words sinking into her heart. You believe in me," she whispered. I do, Daniel said firmly, though his voice cracked with exhaustion. You're more than what they made you. More than what they want from you. You're Lyra, and you deserve to live the way you choose. Her tears fell again, glowing faintly as they landed on his skin. She leaned down, wrapping her arms around him carefully, afraid to hurt him further. He felt her warmth, her trembling, body pressed against his. For the first time since she climbed through his window, Lyra let herself break. She sobbed into his shoulder, her glow flickering like a candle in the storm. Daniel held her weakly, whispering through the pain. You're not alone anymore. We'll face it together. The night stretched long. Daniel drifted in and out of sleep, his wound aching but slowly healing under Lyra's strange touch. She never left his side. Every time his breathing faltered, she pressed her hands tighter, whispering words in a language he didn't understand, words that seemed to stitch his very soul together. When morning finally came, the rain had stopped. The city outside looked unchanged, but for Daniel, everything was different. He sat up slowly, his strength not fully returned, and saw Lyra sitting quietly by the broken window. Her hair glowed faintly in the sunlight, her posture calm but resolute. She wasn't trembling anymore. Daniel joined her, wincing at the pain but forcing a smile. What now? He asked softly. Lyra turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice stronger than before. Now, I choose. Not for them. Not for fear. For me. For us. Daniel's chest swelled with pride. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was deciding, and in that fragile, quiet morning, he realized something powerful. Humanity wasn't about strength or power. It was about choice. About standing when everything tells you to fall. About making room for hope, even in the darkest places. And together, they were ready for whatever came next. The morning sun painted the ruined apartment in soft gold. Dust floated in the air like drifting stars. Daniel leaned against the broken window frame, his wound still aching but wrapped in clean cloth. Beside him, Lyra stood tall, her glowing hair catching the light, her eyes calm but filled with quiet fire. For a brief moment, it felt like peace. But peace never lasted long. The ground shook, the air hummed. From the streets below came the sharp crack of engines and the echo of metallic feet. Shadows moved through the alley, sleek and inhuman. The hunters had come again. Daniel clenched, his jaw. They found us. Lyra closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of their steps. She wasn't afraid anymore, not the way she had been before. She turned to Daniel, her voice steady. This time I will not run. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to argue, to tell her they could hide, but he saw the look in her eyes. She had made her choice. The first of the machines climbed through the shattered door, its body sharp and black, its red eyes glowing with cold hunger. Behind it, more followed, their steps shaking the floor. Daniel grabbed a broken metal pipe, his hands trembling. Guess it's just us. Lyra stepped forward, her glow growing stronger with each breath. Not just us. Us together. The machines hissed and lunged. Daniel swung with every ounce of strength he had, knocking one back, but he was quickly overpowered. Just as claws reached for him, light erupted across the room. Lyra stood in the center, her body burning like a star. The markings on her skin flared bright, her hair lifting as if caught in an unseen wind. For a heartbeat, Daniel feared she had become the weapon she dreaded, but then he heard her voice. Clear, strong, human.